Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Well, today we ask if there's a hidden agenda for Punjab now playing out across its streets. More overnight violence in Kashmir, and could this be linked to that same agenda? We have reaction over Narendra Modi's visit to Moscow, and a senior Sikh figure speaks out over India's double standards against his community. And Amritpal Singh takes his oath at last. And will India's Booker Prize winning author face jail for comments she made 14 years ago? All this and more in today's packed show. And joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to all of our amazing viewers out there. Thanks for tuning in and also for sharing all of your amazing comments with us. Keep them coming.
Indeed, and together we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll take a look at your great comments, which as always have been pouring in, and thank you so much as always for those. So, to start us off, as always, James, what have you got for us today?
Well, the atrocities and violence continue in Kashmir. Today, we're actually going to take a look at a story here that a bus was attacked, and in that bus there were people going on a pilgrimage to a temple, and with that there were children on board. 2 children died out of the 9 that were killed, and then an additional 33 injured. The army and the police again are searching for attackers, as we saw in the ambush of soldiers the other day. But again, somehow these perpetrators keep getting away when they make these attacks. This is something that, as I touched on, we did discuss the other day on the ongoing violence and the increase of violence and attacks that are going on within the region and the district. Now, this bus, as I said, was on its way to a pilgrimage, and that was the base camp of the Hindu shrine of Mata Vaisho Devi, which I apologize if I mispronounced that. But it was on the way, as I said, when it was fired upon. The driver was struck by bullets. The bus then careened off of a slope, and at which time the gunfire continued. They continued to fire at the bus as it was going down the embankment. Absolutely no mercy for these individuals. And again, they were not a threat to these attackers in any way, shape, or form, especially after the driver was hit and the bus was crashing. So with that, there were several responses after they reported that Narendra Modi had taken stock of the situation. And what they said in terms of Manoj Sinha, the region's top administrator on X, formerly Twitter, had stated very clearly, all those behind this heinous act will be punished soon. And it doesn't say they'll be caught and arrested or, taken to court. It just says they will be punished soon. And it is very tough talk against the attackers. No one's claimed the responsibility yet, but Mohita Sharma, the district police chief, has told Reuters that the suspected militants had ambushed the bus, which we've already covered. This is going back with the battles and the wars between India and Pakistan over who controls and actually owns Kashmir and Jammu, the different districts. And this has been going on since 1947 partition and reignited in 1989. The violence, again, has just been causing an uprise, both between the Hindus and the Muslims and others within the region. So it's something, once again, that the India government is failing to bring peace within their communities. They are failing to take substantial and measurable actions to find a resolution, along with Pakistan, to bring peace to this region that has been torn by violence and upheaval for many decades. And the time has come to really say enough is enough. Let's find a way to move forward. And it is just a really sad, sad day when these lives are being lost, a 2-year-old, a 14-year-old, women. I mean, there was no threat there, and it's just an horrific incident. And I'm going to just pull up here where the military in this image are searching for the attackers, for the assailants, and on this, the Home Minister, had stated that the culprits of this dastardly attack will not be spared and will face the wrath of law. And again, it seems like they're using Twitter quite often to put out their statements. And that, again, is something that you can follow online. But in closing on that, Rahul Gandhi, of course, spoke up on this and questioned the security situation in the region. That's something that we've been touching on with Angus and I both, in terms of the violence that's been just escalating in that territory. And he went on to state again on X, the shameful incident is the true picture of worrying security situation in Jammu and Kashmir, he wrote. So again, it's just a continuation of the violence, and it's just at a point where there needs to be federal action by both sides to come back to the table, find some type of mediated or negotiated settlement, and or at least a ceasefire, and to stop attacking the innocent people. The soldiers the other day, they were ambushed, but again, they are soldiers. So there's a bit less, and I hate to measure it that way, there's a bit less demand or outrage when it comes to soldiers as it is when there's women and children being killed for absolutely no reason. So with that, I'll send it back to you in the studio for your comments there, Angus.
Yeah, just another tragedy, isn't it, in Kashmir? And it's very easy to get sucked into the deep emotions of something so awful as this. And I think you have to try and force yourself just to take a few steps back and say, okay, let's just look at the bigger picture here. What is going on? And I'll talk a little bit about this in one of my news stories in a moment. But what is going on in Kashmir? We do know that presidential rule was invoked in 2019 as a result of these militant incursions into Kashmir and the militant activity that's been going on for many years. We do know that Islamic militants are coming in from Pakistan, from the western side into Kashmir, and they are causing a lot of these incidents. Now, they are driven by whatever motivation drives them. As I think we referred to yesterday, it's religious extremism to some degree. And in my personal opinion, religious extremism of any type is not a good thing. Life is all about moderation and balance and equality, etc., etc. And one does wonder, what is the agenda going on in Kashmir from both sides? Firstly, from the Islamist side, and secondly, from the Indian government side. Now, the Islamist side, we've seen Islamic extremism all around the world, and where it has drifted into extremism, it has caused chaos, it's caused division, and it's caused tragedy. And as always, it's innocent people who suffer these terrible incidents. But at the same time, and to balance that, the Indian government have gone in with sheer brute force, and they've trampled on human rights. They have been responsible for many, many deaths in Kashmir as well. So the bigger picture is you've got two sides essentially at war. In all simple terms, it's a war between two very high level cultures. But in the reality, on the ground, what actually is happening is innocent men, women and children are being killed by these people playing their games. Now, Kashmir is a Muslim majority state. And the vast, overwhelming majority of these Muslims are just ordinary people who just want to live a quiet life. They just want to go on with their lives unaffected by politics or extremism or anything like this. They have no quarrel with their fellow Hindus, their fellow Sikhs, their fellow Christians. They all just want to live together in peace. Now, that's not naive or simplistic. That is what the majority of humanity wants. And yet we have both these sides pouring into Kashmir and using it. And they're just pawns in this ridiculous battle that's going on. What is the solution? We talked about it yesterday, James. In my opinion, there is no simple solution to this other than, you've got to, I think India needs to cast it free and let it form its own government. Let it have its autonomy back, instead of both sides trying to essentially drive brute force, a hammer blow, to try and quell and bury this violence. It's not working. It hasn't worked for decades. There has to be another solution. So yeah, James, my thoughts, I just, I almost shrug my shoulders and say, what is the solution to this? It's played out, ironically, this same battle is played out in many parts of the world, isn't it?
It is, and it's just sad because in war there really are no winners when it comes down to the lives lost in the loss of culture. I mean, with this battle going on for decades, there's so much focus on the violence, on the terror, on everything else, that a lot of people will lose the ability to bring and educate the next generation on the history and the culture that is so rich and abundant from, centuries. So it's a shame, no matter where we look in the world, to see people losing lives for no reason at the end of the day.
Yeah, it is. It's a very sad story. And Kashmir is one of the most beautiful places on this planet. And actually, to be fair to the state at the moment, tourism is increasing, I gather. They held the G20 meeting there at the end of last year. Lots of pictures. There was a lot of, obviously, PR about the G20 meeting last year and how wonderful Kashmir was, etc., etc. But that does bury a lot of the underlying undercurrents of tension, of violence, of unhappiness, dissatisfaction, and the native indigenous Muslim population very unhappy with what Modi has done. But Modi has done in the way that he only knows best, which is to use sheer brute force to try and drive this violence away by, ironically, more violence. That's what it boils down to. So no, James, no easy solution.
Yeah. No,
okay, James, let's move on. What have you got for us next?
And we are going to move on to a political activist and author who made comments 14 years ago at a conference and convention. And Arundhati Roy, or Ms. Roy as many refer to her, is an award-winning novelist. She came out in 1997 with a book called The God of Small Things, and that went just international. She was shot to international fame and stardom with her making comments at the time. She was charged with sedition along with an Indian lawyer, and they were both charged, as well as two others at the time. Now, under the sedition law that they were charged in 2022, the law was thrown out by the highest court in the land. What has happened now, for some reason, they've stepped in and they're actually charging her under the anti-terror laws, which is very frequently used by Modi and his government to silence critics, to go after people who do not share or speak out against his policies and his beliefs or that of the BJP. So it is a use of force and brutality, just like you were stating earlier when it came to Kashmir. And this is just ridiculous. They claim that she is an enemy of India because in that statement that she made in 2010, she had referred to the different things. And again, in Kashmir, ironically enough, it's up again. But they accused her of trying to break up India and of hating it, when in fact, quite the opposite was true. She was actually a very much patriot, in love with her country, in love with all people, not just one group or another, but in love with all people. And at the end of the day, she was just trying to bring light to the violence, the atrocities, and the murders that were going on at that time. And, there were protests, and some of the protesters were killed by police, by military, and others. So she really felt a passion to speak out, and now she's being punished for it in what they refer to as the world's biggest and largest democracy. If that's democracy, then there's definitely a loss of translation of the definition somewhere around the world, because we need, in order to have democracy, we have to have open and free press, we have to have the right to speak and to share differing opinions, because that's how we learn from each other. That's what I want to touch on that, Angus. And I forgot to bring up the actual story here, but here is a photo of Ms. Roy. And this is, again, a decade-old situation that is just ridiculous to bring it up now. And it's under a law that Modi's just abusing over and over, and even more frequently, it seems, lately. So with that, I'll turn that back to you, Angus.
Yeah, James, this is quite an interesting story. And the word that springs to mind is the word insecurity. It's very evident that regimes who are moving towards totalitarianism have a sense of insecurity. They fear the people. Their biggest, deepest fear is that the people will turn on them. And I think this is what's happening here. There is a deep level of insecurity in the Indian regime. The further that they move towards totalitarianism, the deeper their insecurity, that the people will actually discover what's going on and turn on them. And when regimes start to use legislation as a weapon, it weaponizes the law against its own people, then you know this insecurity exists. And there are two pieces of legislation that we regularly bring up that actually have been brought up on a regular basis by human rights organisations. That is the National Security Act and the UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, James, which is what you referred to. And this author has been charged under one of these anti-terror laws. These anti-terror laws are just basically they're arbitrary pieces of legislation that allows a government to abuse its position and detain anybody it thinks is a threat to itself under very loose terminology. I mean, the legislation basically gives it carte blanche. It gives it an open book to arrest anybody it doesn't like and then detain them indefinitely, as we have seen in many cases, Amritpal Singh being just one of many, Jathedar Singh jail, yet another. And of course, this lady is now falling into this same situation. And so, yeah, to me, it's just another red flag. It is another alarm bell of what's happening in India. This is an author. If a regime fears authors, people who write books, then you know we're going into very dangerous territory. We saw it in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. And this comparison is valid more than ever. It's very easy to draw up. It's a common tactic in many arguments across certainly the West to compare things to Nazi Germany. But we do regularly. Many of our podcast guests regularly refer to this comparison to Nazi Germany because the red flags are... They are writ large, they are evident all the way through. And this very simple, this lady who's exercising her freedom of speech. And James, you mentioned that one of her so-called crimes was referring to the potential breakup of India. Again, it comes back to this insecurity. How insecure must a government feel, must a nation itself feel, if somebody talks about the potential breakup of that nation, that they then must arrest and detain this person? That is not a sign of a nation that is secure and confident in its own righteousness. Something is deeply wrong in India, and this lady is a very clear example of that. So yes, James, I'm afraid a great story to pick up, and to me it is just another red flag of where India is going with this.
Absolutely. And with the crimes that she's charged with, there's no statute of limitations, so they can bring them up at any point. That's why they're charging her this way. The trials can be delayed for, indefinitely. And also on these charges, it's very, very rare for the individual to get bail. So again, it is really just attacking and going after her. And when she was addressing the breakup of India, she was actually encouraging the opposite, that she didn't want it to break up. She wanted it to be a peaceful, inclusive country, but was bringing the dialogue to the people and the conversation. So it's a sad state of where things lay.
Yeah, it's checks and balances, as we call it. The phrase is checks and balances. In the West, we have a lot of anti-terror legislation, and very rarely it is abused. And I'll give you one example here in the UK. A few years ago, the Labour Party, who's actually now the government, they held a political conference, I forget how many years ago, it was about, 7, 8 years ago. And there was a gentleman, an old gentleman, I think he was in his 70s, maybe even in his 80s, and an elderly gentleman at the back of the room cried out something. He heckled, he said something, "Well, this is rubbish," or something. And the next thing that happened was the security and police moved in. They dragged him physically out of the back and they arrested him under anti-terror laws. Now, there was an absolute outcry in the media, in public, social media. Everybody says, what on earth is this? This is an outrageous abuse of anti-terrorism laws. This man just was essentially a political dissenter. He just criticised a politician, saying you're wrong in whatever terms he used. And he was arrested under anti-terror laws. Now, in any way, shape or form, there was nothing terroristic about this. But this was an example of how anti-terror laws can be abused. But here in the West, there was an immediate outcry from the public. Everybody said, no, you cannot do this. He was released and the whole thing was shown for exactly what it was, an outrageous abuse of anti-terror legislation. But where's that in India? Where are the public standing up and shouting, this is wrong? Now, that is happening from the minorities, the Sikhs, many of the Christians are saying it, the Muslims are saying it. This is an abuse of legislation. But why aren't the Hindus saying this? And I'll refer back to something I said some time ago. If the Hindus don't call this out now, then what happens when they come for you? Who will stand up and shout to protect your human rights? Yeah, James, great story. It's a very small example of a much, much bigger story.
It is. It definitely is, Angus. And I'll turn it over. What have you got for us today?
Yeah, okay, well, let's talk about democratic nations, democratic leaders who are very happy to stand on the world stage and say, we are the largest democracy in the world. Well, Narendra Modi has done that regularly and he has now gone to visit Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And they have been seen embracing in front of the world's cameras. Now, my first story is just to take a quick look at some of the reaction around the world about this. Narendra Modi landed in Moscow on Monday. And when he landed, this was just hours, literally just a few hours after Putin himself had witnessed his army launching a massive barrage across Ukraine during this war. And this barrage killed at least 38 people, and one of the targets was a children's hospital in Kiev, sparking condemnation from governments in Europe and North Africa. So whilst these two men essentially have been embracing, and Narendra Modi, this so-called leader of the largest democracy, the man he's embracing has just bombed a children's hospital. So of course this unsurprisingly has released a barrage of outrage from the world, not least from, of course, Vladimir Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine. And he tweeted, actually, yesterday after this, he said, in Ukraine today, 37 were killed, 3 of whom were children. 170 were injured, including 13 children, as a result of Russia's brutal missile strike. A Russian missile strike, the largest children's hospital in Ukraine, targeting young cancer patients. Many were buried under the rubble. It is a huge disappointment and a devastating blow to peace efforts to see the leader of the world's largest democracy hug the world's most bloody criminal in Moscow on such a day. Well, Mr. Modi, you are the leader, supposedly, of the world's largest democracy. And here we go. This is the reaction. This is what people around the world are thinking of you so far. Now, of course, Russian media, like India's media, is a mouthpiece of their own state governments. And Russia Today, which is a well-known Russian propaganda news channel, and it's actually quite entertaining to watch on many occasions. And again, like Indian media, it is so deeply partisan. And yesterday there was an interview of a lady called Maria Butina. She was actually a Russian agent who was actually she was originally jailed in the USA for essentially nefarious subversive activities. Basically, she was a spy for Russia, and she was sent back to Moscow, and she now works for Russia Today, and she was interviewed. And this interview just happened just after this bombing. And during this interview, she was asked about this meeting with Narendra Modi. And one of the first questions was about, was this date a coincidence? with the NATO meeting, the 75th anniversary of NATO, which James reported about yesterday. And she says, of course it wasn't a coincidence. This meeting date was deliberate. It was to send out a very clear message to the West that Russia is deeply allied with India and there is a very deep mutual relationship going on there. And she talked about how Russia sympathises with India because Russia, like India, understands the aggression of the West. She also said that Putin is very pro-sovereign. He believes in the sovereignty of nations, which sits very strangely and paradoxically with the invasion of Ukraine. And most importantly, she referred to this historic relationship. And she also highlighted and reminded viewers of this deep historic relationship where the Soviet Union had always supported India during its past. And of course, I refer back to then Indira Gandhi and what we mentioned yesterday about Indira Gandhi. Now, the USA, of course, have responded quite predictably, and a lot of the reaction around the world has been very predictable. But the USA, the State Department, in the form of Matthew Miller, one of their spokesmen, he said very diplomatically, the United States calls on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to emphasise Ukraine's territorial integrity as he meets in Russia with Putin on the eve of a NATO summit in Washington. We would urge India, as we do any country which engages with Russia, to make clear that any resolution to the conflict in Ukraine needs to be one that respects the UN Charter with respect to Ukraine's territorial integrity and Ukraine's sovereignty. So very diplomatically saying, look, Mr. Modi, please ask Mr. Putin to respect it. Now, Mr. Modi has himself said in his press releases over the last 24 hours that he did ask Mr. Putin to seek a peaceful solution to Ukraine. Yeah, I'm sure Mr. Putin is going to take a lot of note of that. And of course, CNN, one of the larger US media outlets, news outlets, has shown Modi embracing Putin, and this was literally right after the children's hospital bombing. And they reported that their reaction being one of outrage. So yeah, James, I think all the reaction, the global reaction, particularly from Western media, has been very unsurprising, and of course from Zelensky himself in Ukraine, all very unsurprising. They are highlighting this relationship of Russia and India, saying, double standards, Mr. Modi. You call yourself a democracy, yet you are seen embracing somebody who has been ostracised by the global community as being essentially a dictator, one of these totalitarian leaders of a state where democracy is long forgotten. So, James, double standards again.
Exactly. And something I found interesting was, of course, what you touched on is the conversation they had about Ukraine at the welcoming dinner. And then also with Modi stating that they've reached an agreement to bring some Indians who were serving in the Russian military to bring them back to India and for Putin to release them. So that's interesting. And I didn't really get a chance to research a lot on the involvement of the Indian soldiers, why they're fighting for Russia and such. But I'll have to look into that and bring that up further later.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because I had intended to mention that yesterday when we talked about this story, and of course we ran out of time. But yes, it's worth bringing that up, James. As far as I understand, that many Indians have gone to help the Russian war effort, which in itself, speaks volumes. But what actually has happened, unfortunately, for these individuals is they've gone to help on a peripheral basis, basically in a support function, not frontline function. But they've found themselves, when they turned up, being recruited into the Russian armed forces and suddenly finding themselves on the front line fighting in Ukraine. So unfortunately, one could bring in karma here. But yeah, I think that is a story that maybe we will report on in more detail. But yeah, thanks for mentioning that, James. Okay, let's move on to my second story. Let's move away from international affairs and let's look at something a little bit more closer to the Punjab.
Try to keep ourselves on time today.
Indeed, always up against the clock. So, my second story. This is a very specific story to the Punjab, but it does highlight a lot of these double standards issues. And this is the Jathedar, the leader of one of the 5 tags. This is the Jathedar of Takht Sri Damdana Sahib, and his name is Giani Harpreet Singh, and he's made a very bold statement and a very strong statement. He has said And he's referring to a lot of the comments that have been made in the new Indian Parliament. Hindu Rashtra Zindabad is hailed in India. So what's wrong with Sikh Rashtra slogan? And he said a lot of these comments after meeting with the parents of Amritpal Singh. And he was responding to a lot of journalists questioning him about, the situation of Amritpal and the Indian Parliament. And he said, Sikh men and women are being elected to parliaments in foreign countries, as of course they have been in the UK. If any Sikh reaches parliament in India, the NSA, this National Security Act, this horrible piece of legislation, the NSA is invoked on him. Hindu Rashtra Zindabad is raised in Indian Parliament, and those who raise these slogans are honoured. But if any Sikh youth speaks on Sikh Rashtra, what's wrong with that? So again, he's referring to these double standards. It's all right for these Hindu politicians who've been elected to shout, Hindu Rashtra. But if Amritpal Singh had done that, we know exactly what would have happened. And he continues to say, I would like to ask the government that there must be no discrimination against Sikhs. Rules are different for the Punjab and other states. In other states, the NSA is invoked for only 1 year, but in Punjab, it's for 2 years. And he's, of course, referring to people like Amritpal Singh, who was detained for at least 1 year, and now they've extended it. Now, actually, they've only extended it for 3 months, but it's due for renewal in, I think it's July the 25th. And it will be unsurprising that it's renewed again and again, this indefinite detention. But what he's highlighting here is these double standards. Again, anybody who's detained in the Punjab under it seems to go on indefinitely. So keeping Amritpal Singh behind bars is unjust. It should not be done. And he was also the former acting Jathedar of the Akal Takht in Amritsar. And he continued to say this is a bad intention of the government, which has always committed excesses against the Sikhs. Extending detention under the NSA a day before the elections is a big excess. Of course, he's referring to Amritpal's detention being extended just before the national elections. It's a very cynical timing. Again, Sikhs are made to feel second or third class citizens in this country. The terror was created without any reason during the oath-taking of Amritpal Singh. The government is not even honouring the mandate he got from the people. India calls itself as the largest democracy in the world. If so, there must be honour for a democratically elected leader, and he and other Sikh youths lodged under the NSA should be released from jail. Now, he reacts to an attack on the Shiv Sena leader, and I'll come back to this because this is a side issue I'd like to talk about as well. But he referred to a recent attack on a Hindu. And this Hindu leader often makes hateful speeches against Sikhs. And he said about this, I am not an advocate of violence, but many people are working to spread hate on communal lines. Spreading hate against any religion and its ethos is very unfortunate. Speaking against any religion is also not fair. Basically, he's highlighting this fact that we highlight on a regular basis, this deliberate divisive politics of the RSS and these extremist nationalists. They are trying to drive division between religions, between the communities. On the anniversary of 1984 attack on Sri Darbar Sahib and the Akal Takht, he said in 2020, as Jathedar, when he was Jathedar of Akal Takht, he said, every Sikh wants Khalistan. And if the government offers them formation of a separate nation, they will accept it happily. He's basically confirming that it is ingrained in the Sikh community that they want sovereignty, they want their own nation, they want their nation back of Khalistan. The Sikhs are in state of enthusiasm on the anniversary, and as a result they raise the slogans in favour of Khalistan. There's nothing wrong if slogans are raised after the function. It's wrong if you do so amid the function as it disrupts it. Basically saying there's nothing wrong with flying Khalistan flags. What is so undemocratic about this? And then he said further about Khalistan, if the Indian government offers us Khalistan, what else do we need? We will accept it. Which Sikh is there in the world who doesn't wish it? So he's reinforcing this fact that the majority of Sikhs, whether in the Punjab or in the diaspora, they want a separate nation. So this is a very powerful statement that this Sikh leader has made, and it flies in the face of what Narendra Modi and the BJP are saying, where it's just a fringe movement. It is not. This is the leader. This is one of the highest profile characters in the Sikh community, making it very clear, as did Amritpal Singh, an elected by a large majority member of the Lok Sabha, who has said the very same. We believe in Khalistan. Why can we not have it? Now, I just want to just go off on a slight tangent here. This was interesting, even for me, learning about these sorts of things. This attack on this character, this Sandeep Thapar that happened just the other day, and he's one of these hate figures, one of these people like Mr. Sinha that I referred to yesterday, who is part of this RSS, this Hindutva online army and real world army, who are driving divisions between the communities, trying to turn people against the Sikh community. He was attacked, with swords by 3 Nihangs in full public view in Ludhiana. And the attackers were upset with Thapar's videos on social media, where he would often put his provocative speeches against radical and hardline Sikhs, especially against slain militant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. Now, apart from the fact this raises this whole issue again of hate speech on Twitter, X, by these Hindutva people, it refers to 3 Nihangs, and I thought, what is a Nihang? Now, James, I will read this to you as well, because this is fascinating for us as Westerners. The Nihang, also spelt as Nihung. Yeah, the Nihang, also spelt as Nihung, and this literally means crocodiles, or Akali, they're also known as Akali, which again literally means immortals. They're also known as Dal Khalsa. A Nihang is an armed Sikh warrior order. Nihangs are believed to have originated either from Fateh Singh and the attire he wore, or from the Akal Sena, literally Army of the Immortals, started by Guru Hargobind. Early Sikh military history was dominated by the Nihang, known for their victories where they were heavily outnumbered, traditionally known for their bravery and ruthlessness in the battlefield. The Nihang once formed the irregular guerrilla squads of the armed forces of the Sikh Empire, the Sikh Khalsa Army. Now, this is really inspiring stuff, and I do love just to indulge in this a little bit, because the history of Sikhs is such a fabulous, noble history, and this warrior order, the Dal Khalsa, is part of this wonderful, rich history of the Sikhs, and I just want to show a picture, if I may. Let me find this picture, because I just find this deeply inspiring. If you just give me one moment. Here we go. Right. So this picture is, I'll give you the description of this picture. This is a Nihang bodyguard serving in the Nizam of Hyderabad's irregular Sikh army, and the date is around 1865. Now, this picture, this is such a great picture of one of these Nihangs. Now, when I say inspiring, you imagine as a British soldier, when the British Empire was encroaching on the Sikh Empire and they came head to head, as a British soldier, if I came up against a character like this, I would be quaking in my boots. I mean, how terrifying is this character with this fabulous uniform? This fabulous, I mean, his moustache in itself is just magnificent. And I just, when I saw this picture, it just almost brought goosebumps on my arms, thinking, you imagine as a soldier in a far-flung land, you're marching through what is now today's Pakistan and Afghanistan, and you come up in battle against characters like this. You would be terrified. I would be terrified. You know, with his sword in hand, his magnificent uniform, and he'll be marching at you with absolute zeal and bravery and courage in his eyes. I would run the other way, James. I mean, wow. We talk about the Sikh army and how ingrained it is in their culture, this warrior culture. It's in their genes. And yeah, you see this picture. Does this not evoke amazing thoughts?
And we talked about how how effective the Sikhs were in terms of the intimidation factor alone, let alone their amazing bravery and their skills in combat. I mean, you know, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we could dive in and talk for hours about how the British Empire beat this incredible Sikh army, and it probably comes down to just military discipline and just, well, etc., etc. But certainly when you see this, you know, and then you realise and you remember how brave these soldiers and their record in the British Army in 2 world wars. You know, you just look at the roots of this and you understand why now they have served with such distinction when their roots are men like this. And yeah, it's astounding. And maybe, James, we should be doing more stories looking into the history of the Sikh Empire and their warrior class, because yeah, it's inspiring stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right, okay, let's move on to more serious matters now. Now, my next story, again, looks at the Punjab. And again, another video has emerged on social media. And I'll play this video for you now. I've deliberately blurred out the worst of it because it's shocking. This is allegedly a video that was recorded in Punjab recently, very recently. And it's more violence in the Punjab. And this is, if I play this video for you now, and I'll talk over it as it plays, it's a pretty shocking video. Now, this apparently was in a street in the Punjab, and it's 2 men beating another man to death, apparently. Allegedly, he died after this incident. Now, when this video was posted up on social media, of course it caused outrage. And primarily, again, this was outrage from all sides. And a lot of the outrage came from people demanding direct control of Punjab. They're saying, look, what's happening in the streets of Punjab? And primarily this came from Hindus. They're saying, look, the Punjab is running out of control. The violence that's being displayed in this video is typical of what's happening in Punjab. And they're saying Punjab is just not being governed properly. And many comments are saying similar things are happening in West Bengal, in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and other states. And many of these commenters are demanding that Article 356 of the Constitution is invoked. Now, Article 356 states that the President can proclaim President's rule in a state if he or she is satisfied that a situation has arisen in which the government of a state cannot be carried on in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. So basically, what's happening in these states, this violence that's breaking out allegedly on the streets, is provoking many people into demanding we must have presidential rule. The central government must move into this state of Punjab and take full control. Now, one has to take steps back here. Is this deliberate? Is this violence that seems to be breaking out in states like Punjab, is it part of an overall agenda? Now, we do know that drugs are pouring into the Punjab. We do know that drugs have this terrible effect on particularly the youth. It undermines societal structure. It undermines law and order. We've also seen the undermining of Sikhi, the undermining of Sikh heritage through schools, through indoctrination in schools, etc. And we also know that the Chief Minister, Bhagwant Mann, has come under a lot of criticism, particularly from the Sikh community, that he is just not maintaining law and order. So, as I said, after this video, there were hundreds of comments, if not even thousands of comments, particularly from Hindus, demanding that somebody takes action. One comment I'll read out as an example. We lost Punjab, we lost Bengal, we lost Manipur. We are slowly losing border states and the inner states. Now, let's take a step back here. And as to some extent, a relatively objective observer of what's happening in the Punjab, I'll give you my thoughts on this. I can see a pattern emerging here. You've got to ask yourself, why is this happening? Primarily in non-BJP controlled states. Potential breakaway states. It's happening in the Punjab. It's happening in West Bengal, as we've reported on several occasions. It's happening in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Manipur, and of course in J&K, Kashmir. Now in the Punjab, drugs are pouring into this state. Why? Where are they coming from? You have to ask. Drugs are not a local issue. Drugs are an international issue. So where are these drugs coming from? Who's paying for them? Who's directing them? Now, any opposition to these drugs that are being poured into the Punjab is immediately removed. Let's look at the examples of that. Amritpal Singh was a deep campaigner. He was a powerful campaigner against the drug use in Punjab. There have been several others that we've reported on this channel who have been removed, who've been very high profile campaigners against this, but they have been removed. Removed who? By the law, by law enforcement, by the state. So why are the state removing this opposition to drugs in these states? The local administration, the local state mechanisms, the IAS, the Indian Administrative Service, the IPS, the Indian Police Services, they are failing to do their jobs. Why are they failing? Is it incompetence or is it something deeper? They've even been seen to be encouraging this sort of behaviour. They're standing by, they're watching it, they're not getting involved, or when they do, it's too late. Is that deliberate? They're almost encouraging this sort of activity. They are witnessing, as is everybody else, they're witnessing these states descending into violence and chaos. And in reaction to that, we are seeing demands for action. We are seeing across India demands for maybe calling for presidential rule. Maybe in these non-BJP states, that's significant, there is a demand that presidential rule, that the BJP government takes control of these states. Now, what does all that point to? I'll give you my thoughts again on this. There is a very old theory that's been around for a long time. It's called problem, reaction, solution. It's a very simple, very cynical, manipulative mechanism that is used the world over by regimes. And a prime example of this, to illustrate this, I'll use the Iraq War as a very good example of what this means. The US state, the US government, many years ago, 25 plus years ago, made a very clear statement that it wanted the ability to be able to mobilise its army anywhere in the world to any part of this planet within 4 hours. To do that, it needed military bases all over the world, and it particularly needed a military base in the Middle East. So it could then mobilise to that whole region within 4 hours, any size of military capability. But it needed a military base. Now, if it suddenly demanded on the world stage, we need a base in Iraq, of course Iraq are going to say no chance, and all the surrounding countries are going to say no, you can't do that. So it needed to create a situation, it needed to create a problem where it could step in and the problem would become so great that people would demand that the US step in and help them, this reaction, so that the US can then provide a solution. So problem, reaction, solution. The problem being that in the Iraq war, Saddam Hussein was creating weapons of mass destruction. And of course, you remember, people will remember, our audience will remember, that all around the world, across the media, this huge propaganda campaign was created to say that Saddam Hussein is evil, he has weapons of mass destruction that are threatening the world, threatening the West. He can launch nuclear capable missiles into Europe and land within 45 minutes. Was it 45 seconds? 45 minutes. So, of course, the public, in reaction to this, said, we need a solution. You've got to do something about it. OK, we'll invade Iraq. They invaded Iraq, defeated Saddam Hussein, and the solution then was that the US Army has its base in Iraq. The problem, reaction, solution mechanism there basically meant that the US got what it wanted in the face of originally what seemed an outrageous demand. And this is what's happening in the Punjab. Problem, reaction, solution. The problem is being created. There is violence, there is chaos in parts of Punjab. So the people, the reaction, is the people are demanding presidential rule. The solution, the Indian government, we've got a solution for you. We'll come in with presidential rule. So one has to ask, is there a hidden agenda being rolled out across all these states, whether it's Karnataka, whether it's West Bengal, whether it's the Punjab, Kashmir, which has already got presidential rule, so the precedent has been set, whether it's any of these states, Manipur. Is this part of a wider agenda to undermine these states that are non-BJP, non-Hindu majority states, most of them? Is there an agenda to undermine law and order so that it can be essentially taken stronger control of by central government? I don't know, that is all speculation, but one wonders when one takes a step back from this and looking at it a bit more objectively, something is afoot. There is a pattern there. James, any thoughts on that?
It's definitely food for thought, Angus. And I mean, you can trace it back to the days that there's speculation and some alleged evidence of the CIA pumping the crack and the cocaine into inner city areas of the U.S. back in the 70s and 80s. So, again, it's not unheard of for governments to try to use drugs to destroy a culture or a community.
Yeah, it's. I think a lot of the alarm bells are there. A lot of the signs are there that there is an agenda going on here. Drugs don't pour into an area for no reason at all. And as you say, quite often they are controlled. The channel of those drugs are controlled through acquiescence. In other words, law enforcement just standing by and letting it happen quietly because it serves a bigger agenda. And one wonders in the Punjab and these other states, is there another agenda at play here? So yeah, it's. I'll be interested to see our audience's comments on that and if they have any more thoughts. Because of course a lot of our audience live in the Punjab or are very close to the Punjab, so they will have a much better local knowledge. So yeah, I'll ask our audience if you've got comments on that theory, on that hypothesis. Let us know. Let us know your thoughts on that. Because of course, Amritpal Singh has been one of the most outspoken opponents of what's happening in Punjab in terms of the drug use and its terrible effect on the youth. And of course, he has since been removed under this dreadful NSA, this National Security Act. So a quick update then as my final story of the day. Amritpal Singh, he has taken his oath. He's sworn his oath at last week. His wife, Kirandeep, did inform me actually at the time that he had been released to take his oath. But she also said that he was not allowed to do anything else. He was literally escorted to Lok Sabha. He took his oath and the condition that he was under was he was not allowed to even speak to anybody else. He had to take his oath and he was whisked straight back to Dibrugarh jail back in the east of India in Assam. So, but yeah, so the reports come through that both Amritpal and Sheikh Abdul Engineer Rashid, they both took their oaths in the Lok Sabha and yeah, there's, well, I won't go into detail. We talked about it a lot. But yeah, James, I think the big question is, will he be released? I think in light of the story we've just been talking about and the drugs in Punjab, I think he's clearly a very dangerous character for the Indian government. And if there is a hidden agenda going on here, I think he is one of the dangers, one of the threats to not just revealing this agenda, but to stopping it in its tracks.
Well, and the sheer numbers and volume of people that turned out to vote for him shows that he has influence, which, of course, again, is concerning to the ruling government. So it's hopeful that he gets out soon. But again, it's about whether or not Modi and the BJP find ways to just be snakes and slide through the grass to make that very difficult to achieve.
Indeed. Right. Okay. Let's move on because once again, time is pressing. Let's take a look at some of your great comments. Okay. So one of our stories. That was yesterday's show when we talked about Modi going to visit Mr. Putin. But one of the comments we received was from Jay Singh, and this person said the only reason the RSS terrorists posted videos because this was the terrible. Video of that woman being beaten in West Bengal because they couldn't get footing in West Bengal even after multiple failed attempts. But for your information, police are under the Central Federal Government of India Home Ministry. Hindutva terrorists play these stunts themselves to defame opposition parties. Yeah, so this comment actually supports, I think, a lot of that we've been theorising about what's going on here. Firstly, West Bengal, yeah, it is not a BJP seat and hasn't been for a long time, certainly since 2011. And so, is there an agenda going on in West Bengal? And so the RSS, the Hindutva people online, are posting videos like this to undermine the governance in these states. But a very important point here, the police are under the Central Federal Government of India Home Ministry control. Yeah, again, are these actors acting on behalf of the Indian government and behalf of this agenda? One does wonder. And also Hindutva terrorists play these stunts themselves to defame opposition parties. Yeah, it could be part of a false flag. Again, it's all part of defaming these democratically elected parties, non-BJP parties in these states. So, yeah, quite possibly, James, It's nefarious activities. It's hidden agendas again.
Just keeps going on, Angus. Keeps going on.
Okay, one of our earlier shows, Jaspal Chatterfull commented, "If you speak out and ask for justice, then you are a target. Many journalists are shut down who speak out." Yeah, this refers to a very valid point that we raise again regularly, and particularly in Kashmir, where any media outlet that dares speak up against the oppression that's going on, the oppression of human rights, they are closed down instantly. And again, we've reported many times on several media outlets, news channels that have been closed down, websites taken down, television channels, or just simple print newspapers closed down, particularly in the Kashmir, when they have stood up against the Modi regime. Jaspal Chaffel also said only a handful of these individuals in India own over 90% of the wealth, while over 80 million people are living with just a few dollars a day. Yeah, again, this is back to the billionaire story, which is rumbling on, James. This is where, and again, I'll highlight the fact this actually isn't just India, although it is, I would say it is at an extreme in India, but it's also to some degree in the West as well and across the world. But this again is where a tiny handful...
Absolutely it is.
Yeah, it's a tiny handful of people in humanity who own the vast majority of the wealth. Again, as I say, it's not just India, but it is particularly in India. Waman Singh commented, "Even if all the MPs are Sikhs," this is all the new 11 MPs here in the UK Parliament, "even if they all are Sikhs, they are not going to do anything for the Sikhs. The only thing they're going to do is line their own pockets." This is a very cynical comment, and I think it probably reflects the feelings of many people. Again, in India, certainly, and probably here in the UK, and probably just as much in Canada, James, and the US. It's a cynical comment saying, do we really trust and believe MPs, or are they in it just for their own wealth? And this is, I think this is a very important point, because we've seen regularly in politics everywhere in the world. And again, this is a human issue. It's not, I don't think it's just an Indian issue. I think many MPs go into it not because they are motivated to do good. They're not motivated by their innate desire to help the people that represent them. They're in it because they want to get rich, they want to get powerful, they want control, they want etc. etc. They're not in it for the right reasons. And I think particularly here in the UK, and James, you can comment on this, in the UK we have a real problem with MPs in that many are career politicians. They're not people who've been in industry and had a life, had proper jobs, and then feel motivated to help society by going into politics to then make a difference. They go in straight from university. They are nurtured in politics from the day they leave school, essentially. They leave school, they go into politics. They don't know anything about the real world. They never had to hold down a proper job. They never had the pressures of trying to keep a job, to pay their bills, to pay their mortgages. And they go into politics supposedly representing ordinary people like us who do have to put food on our tables, struggle to keep jobs, pay mortgages, etc. So they can't relate to people like us. And this is the problem. I think this is the weakness in politics everywhere now, is that many of the politicians who represent us are not motivated by a desire to make change for good, to represent ordinary people. They are in it just to build their own careers. James, your thoughts?
Absolutely. We have a federal party leader here in Canada, Pierre Poilievre, who is just that. He's a career politician. He opens his mouth and people just shake their head, because it just proves that although he's reaching out and trying to put himself forward as the working man, he is so out of touch, and it's just disgusting sometimes how far out of touch he is. So it is something that we see with our MPs and at provincial level, our MLAs. You know, we see it all the time. So it's not something that's isolated to one certain region.
Yeah, and I suspect it is exacerbated in India. I think it probably is this to an even higher extent, where corruption is endemic. We know corruption exists heavily in India, particularly in politics. And so I think this comment is very valid, certainly here in the West, but it's also even more so in India. It's a shame, but great comment. Thank you for that comment. S. Baines makes the comment, great talk, especially about new laws. Yes, we have talked about a lot of these new laws coming to India. India has never acted as a democracy, and now it appears to be sinking its laws with its behaviour. It is indeed, absolutely. This is in addition to the UAPA laws, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act laws, as you rightly pointed out, these very dangerous anti-democratic laws that allows the government to detain people arbitrarily and essentially indefinitely. The creeping authoritarianism of India is demonstrating how fragile and artificial India really is. This is it, yeah. This is a clear example of the state against its people. Great comment. This comes exactly back to the word I used earlier, insecurity. You're absolutely right. This demonstrates how fragile and artificial India really is. It's artificial, it's fragile, it's insecure. Great comment. Bang on, James. Yeah, totally endorses what we just said. Okay, final set. One of our regulars, D. Harminder Sekon. You are right, Scott. The great comment. This just clarifies some factual points about the Sikh Empire. Thanks for clarifying this. So even the Sikh Empire with just 15% Sikhs, the remaining 45% Muslims, 40% Hindus. And this highlights the point that we've made regularly about how wonderful the Sikh Empire was. And to say to people when they say, oh, the Punjab is minority Sikhs. But yeah, if Khalistan became independent, like the Sikh Empire, it doesn't need a majority of Sikhs. As long as Sikhi is the governing ethos of Khalistan, which it will be, it proves how just and fair and equitable it is. Because in the original Sikh Empire, as this great comment points out, it was so just and unbiased that most of the courtiers were Hindus and Muslims. No riots happened in Punjab for 50 years. Not even a single person was sentenced to death by the king. Such a kind person was King Ranjit Singh. Yeah, great point. And thank you for just putting substance on this point that Khalistan, if and when it comes about, will be equally just. And it doesn't need a majority of Sikhs to prove the point that Sikhi as a governing ethos works. Second point that you made, you people don't get too many, okay, thank you, great comment. We don't get many negative comments because your channel is blocked in India, otherwise your comment section would be flooded with abusive language by a billion Indians. Absolutely it would, James. Oh, what a shame, eh?
Absolutely, and I actually responded to that comment saying, yes, we do understand that.
And it is a great shame that we are not that we are blocked in India for many reasons, not least because we want our message to be heard in India. But yeah, it would be interesting to be flooded with these negative comments because I'm not afraid of a debate. I'm not afraid of a challenge. Bring it on, is what I say. So if there are any Hindutva people watching this, please, by all means, comment. We'd love to discuss your comments. Okay, Rajveer Dillon said mainly IAS, IPS officers, this is the administrative service and police service officers, are indirectly responsible for the deteriorating situation of Punjab. They're working under the central government Brahmanical system of India. Great point. Yeah, actually this follows up what we've been talking about earlier. Are they in it themselves? Are they the simple, unwitting tools or even knowing tools of this agenda that's being rolled out across Punjab? Are they deliberately letting this deteriorating situation in Punjab happen? Great point. Thank you for that. And Mo Sander makes the comment, thank you, James and Angus. We appreciate your thoughts on Sikh issues. Well, thank you for watching. We want to see Bhai Amritpal Singh Khalsa as our Chief Minister of Punjab in 2027, so we can save Punjab and move towards Khalistan. Absolutely. What a great aspiration. What a great thought to finish on. Yeah, if democracy is true, if democracy is allowed to unfold as it should do, as Narendra Modi claims, if democracy is allowed to exercise itself, if Punjab is allowed to self-determine, could we see, firstly, Amritpal Singh, Chief Minister of Punjab? I believe the support would be there. What a great Chief Minister he would make. I have no doubt he would be elected as such. And imagine what he could do if he was given governance of the Punjab. But then look at the next step. Why not self-determination? Oh, there's a great future ahead for Punjab. I feel it in my bones, James. What about you?
Absolutely, and it almost brings in line a parallel to some extent with Mandela. So yeah, no, I think it's a great, great goal, great to strive towards.
Yeah, and actually, it was. I messaged when I messaged the wife of Amritpal Singh. We were discussing the situation, and she was obviously feeling quite down about things because her husband has been locked up for over a year without trial. They'd only just got married, so poor Kirandeep, literally just got married, and her husband is arrested arbitrarily and detained indefinitely. So she was feeling down. I said to her at this point, look, one day they will make films and write stories about what's happening now. And I believe they will. I believe we are at this nexus point in the story of Punjab and the future story of Khalistan and the new Sikh empire. So don't lose faith. Keep going. The momentum is building. The Khalistan movement is building, as we have reported on. So, yeah, great comment, Mosander. Thank you very much for that. But unfortunately, we have been beaten once again by time. We must draw things to a close. But that was Perspectives. Please don't forget to keep these comments coming in. They've been fascinating to read. And they've given us lots of interesting insight into your perspectives on the things that we talk about. So do please keep those coming in. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satlowtv.com on any news items you'd like us to talk about. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching Perspectives. It's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from James.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.